In this video, we're going to take a tour of the Universal Orlando Resort to determine which rides are worth going on. I'll be giving you a general overview of each attraction, where it's located in the parks, the intensity of the ride, its average wait time, and whether or not you should do it. With all that said, let's start out in the first park at the resort, Universal Studios. Shortly after entering the park, you'll be walking straight into Minion Land. On the left, you'll see our first attraction, Despicable Me Minion Mayhem. On this ride, you'll be turned into a minion and have to go through several trials to determine if you're fit to serve Gru. This is a fairly basic simulator ride taking place in a small theater, which makes it perfect for the family. The movement can be a bit jarring, but overall I'd give this a 2 out of 5 on the intensity scale. On average, this ride can get some very long wait times, especially at the beginning of the day. Personally, I'd recommend coming back to this ride later in the evening, as it should be less busy by then. As for whether or not you should go on this ride, I'd say it's up to you. It isn't anything special, but for families and kids especially, it is a solid enough ride. However, if you want an even better Despicable Me attraction with less of a wait, the next ride on this list is for you. VillainCon Minion Blast is the newest ride at Universal Studios, located right across from Minion Mayhem. In this attraction, you'll be trying to become the newest member of the Vicious Six, using your blaster to shoot at various objects along your path. This is a very unique shooting dark ride, with guests having to stand up on a moving walkway similar to those found in the Universal parking garage. That also means you'll have to carry your own blaster, which you'll pick up at the end of the ride's queue. While the accessibility of this ride is a bit complicated, the ride as a whole is very mild, placing it at a 1 out of 5 on the intensity scale. As for the wait time, this ride rarely gets very busy, usually hovering around a 30-minute wait. It can get longer depending on the time you visit, but overall, I'd say the waits are about medium. When it comes to my own recommendation, I'd say you may as well try it out. This ride isn't everyone's cup of tea, but for a 20-minute wait, I see no reason not to see for yourself. Now, let's head over to a much more intense ride. Down the street and behind Despicable Me Minion Mayhem is the imposing Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket. On this insane roller coaster, you'll be riding along to a song of your choice, which you can choose on a screen once you get on the ride. Speaking of, once you see that screen, be sure to tap and hold the ride logo to unlock a secret menu of songs. From there, you can enter a 3-digit code to get a unique song not available in the main menu. My personal favorite is 902. Anyways, on the intensity scale, I'd rank this an easy 5 out of 5. This is the most intense ride at the park. Because of that, the line can get pretty long, especially with how often this ride goes down. Still, if you're really committed to riding it, I'd say go for it. It's not an amazing roller coaster in my opinion, but it's certainly the most intense at Universal Studios. Otherwise though, I'd say skip it. This ride is pretty mixed among park guests, with many complaining about how bumpy it is. The time you might waste in line for this takes away from the time you could be waiting for far better rides. It's a decent roller coaster, don't get me wrong, but not necessarily worth the hassle. Next up, we'll be heading over to New York for another fairly basic simulator. Race Through New York starring Jimmy Fallon is an attraction where guests race against Jimmy Fallon through the streets of New York. Pretty self-explanatory, I know. Like Minion Mayhem, this isn't a very intense ride, with a 2 out of 5 rating on the intensity scale. However, unlike Minion Mayhem, the line for Jimmy Fallon is often pretty short. I've rarely seen this ride with a wait over 20 minutes, although it can happen on occasion. It's a really unique queue as well. Rather than waiting in line like a traditional ride queue, each party gets their own colored card. From there, you just have to wait for the lights to shine your color, and then you can head into the ride itself. There are plenty of games and entertainment offered on the second floor to make your wait more interesting. That unique queue is pretty cool, but the ride itself isn't anything special. Although I personally don't think this attraction is very good, I've gotten a lot of comments from people that do enjoy it. If it's a short wait, you may as well try it out yourself. For anything more than 30 minutes though, I'd recommend skipping it. Heading deeper into New York is my personal favorite ride at the park, Revenge of the Mummy. Here, you'll enter the set of the Mummy films, where a real-life curse has taken over the production. The story is a little convoluted and cheesy, but the ride itself really makes up for it. It is another roller coaster, but it's not quite as intense as Rip Ride Rocket, so I'd put it at a 4 out of 5 in terms of intensity. As for the wait times, typically it can have some of the longest waits in the park. Luckily, if you're willing to split your party, there is a single rider line that's worth a shot. Whatever way you get on it, I'd highly recommend riding this ride. For me, it's the absolute best attraction at Universal Studios and one of my favorite rides in the entire world. If you don't like roller coasters, I'd understand skipping it, but otherwise, it's a must-do. Now, let's head down the streets of New York towards the massive gray building where Transformers The Ride 3D sits. This is a thrilling dark ride where you'll fight to protect the Allspark from the evil Decepticons. If you've been on Spider-Man at Islands of Adventure, this is very similar. Despite it being a dark ride, it is surprisingly intense, really shaking you around throughout the ride. I'd still put it at a 3 out of 5, but it is leaning on a 4. When it comes to wait times, they can typically be pretty long for this attraction. It also has a single rider line that you could take advantage of, but again, be sure to note your party will be separated. While my thoughts on this ride are a bit mixed, I do think it's worth a shot if you're willing. If it's over an hour wait, I'd come back when it's a little less busy. Otherwise though, I'd try it out. Up ahead, we'll reach San Francisco, where one of the most controversial rides in the park sits. Fast and Furious Supercharged is a simulator-style attraction where guests take a ride on the party bus and rush through the streets of California. As for the plot, I honestly couldn't tell you. There's a lot of exposition, but none of it makes sense. It's not the most intense ride out there, but sudden movements and loud noises put it at a 2 for me. The line for this ride can also get pretty long, but often hovers somewhere in the middle. As for my personal recommendation, just don't ride it. It's the worst ride at the park, and a huge disappointment all around. If you're morbidly curious and the line is short, I can't blame you for wanting to try it. Otherwise though, this is a ride you absolutely must skip when you go to Universal Studios. Now, let's head straight into Diagon Alley for one of the most iconic rides at the park. Harry Potter and the Escape from Gringotts takes guests right into the depths of Gringotts Bank, riding on a minecart as Harry and friends attempt to break out. It's a thrilling combination of roller coaster and dark ride, putting it at a 4 out of 5 on the intensity scale. Since this is a Harry Potter ride, the lines can often get quite long, but it does have a single rider line if you're willing to skip out on most of the incredible queue. However you get there, this is a must-do at Universal Studios. Universal's Harry Potter attractions tend to be the most expensive and well-themed rides at their parks, and this is no exception. I don't prefer it over Revenge of the Mummy, but it's up there in the top 3 of this park. If you're able to, you have to do this ride. Leaving the Wizarding World, we'll turn left and head right on over to Men in Black Alien Attack. Aliens have been let loose across the city, and it's up to you to take them down and save the day. This is a great shooting dark ride with some solid theming and really unique moments. Here's a tip to improve your score. Be sure to hit the red button when you're prompted to right under the giant alien monster. It will give you a huge bonus if timed just right. Anyways, since this is a shooting dark ride, it's not extremely intense, with the exception of a few powerful spins. With that, I'd put it at a 2 out of 5 on the intensity scale. As for the wait times, the lines don't get extremely long for this attraction. Most of the time, it's hovering between 30 to 45 minutes. Finally, for my personal recommendation, I'd say go for it. This is a very fun and engaging ride, and while it may not be my favorite, it grows on me each time I revisit it. It's a great place to stop by at the park. Close by is the one and only Simpsons ride, right in the heart of Springfield, USA. This is an intense simulator attraction where you follow the Simpsons family as they attempt to evade the evil sideshow Bob. The reason I say intense is because this ride is often known for causing motion sickness in guests. Because of that, I'd put it at a 3 out of 5 on the intensity scale, so keep that in mind when you visit. Lines can get pretty long for this ride, but most of the time I'd say they're about average. If it's around the 30-minute mark, I'd say give it a shot. If you know you're prone to motion sickness, maybe skip this one, but otherwise it's a really comedic and fun ride. However, if it's nearing an hour wait, I'd say you should pass. It's a decent ride, but not up there with the best of the best at this resort. Worth a shot, but only if you want to. Right across the street is King and Kodos' Twirl and Hurl, a simple spinning flat ride. This is an easy 1 out of 5 on the intensity scale, which makes it perfect for younger guests. It also usually has a pretty short wait, so it's worth a shot if you want to try it. Being a flat ride, it's nothing special, but it's a nice small offering for the people with younger kids. Last but not least, let's head to the Edge of Kids Zone to discuss E.T. Adventure. This is the only opening day attraction that's still operating at Universal Studios, so some may argue it's a little dated. However, this dark ride is really charming and has a solid group of fans that absolutely adore it. On this dark ride, you'll be returning E.T. to his home planet so he can save the day with his healing touch. The ride gets really weird in the second half, but I think that's part of the charm with this attraction. In terms of intensity, I'd put it all the way down at a 1 out of 5. There's not a whole lot of spinning or shaking going on, just a straightforward dark ride with some solid theming. The line is usually pretty short for this ride, but on busy days it can peak at around 40 minutes. If it's short though, this is a ride you have to do. You might not love it as much as its biggest fans, but this is one of the few rides at Universal Studios with physical theming throughout the entire attraction. It's not anything crazy, but it's a really cute ride that's worth a shot if you're able. Before we go, it's worth noting that a new DreamWorks land will be opening in the park in 2024. Based on current construction, the only additional ride that should be here is a rethemed version of Woody Woodpecker's Nut House Coaster, now themed to trolls. This troller coaster should be fairly low on the intensity scale, making it a great ride for the kids. There hasn't been an exact date announced, but I'd expect this to open by early summer 2024. That's all for Universal Studios. Now let's head over to Islands of Adventure, starting with the port of entry. From here, we'll take a right turn straight into Seuss Landing, where our first ride sits. The Cat in the Hat is a kid-friendly dark ride based on the iconic book by Dr. Seuss. Since it's meant to be a ride for children, it gets a very low 1 out of 5 on the intensity scale. The wait times are pretty low as well, almost never getting over a 30-minute wait. If it is over 30 minutes, I'd recommend skipping this one. In fact, I'd recommend skipping this one no matter what the wait is. The ride is kind of a mess right now, with poor visual effects and broken animatronics. It can still be a fun ride and good enough for the kids, but it's nowhere near the best attraction at the park. It's not even the best attraction at Seuss Landing, but we'll get to that later. Right next door to the Cat in the Hat is One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish, a simple spinning flat ride. This ride has the gimmick of spraying water at guests, although you can avoid it as long as you follow the instructions. Apart from that, the intensity is a very low 1 out of 5. Wait times are usually pretty short as well. If you have small kids, this is a great attraction to stop by. Otherwise, you can probably skip it unless you have nothing better to do. Now, let's head across the pathway over to the centerpiece of this land, the Carousel. This is a basic carousel ride with some nice Dr. Seuss theming. Like One Fish, Two Fish, this is a fairly basic flat ride that gets a 1 out of 5 on the intensity scale. The line is usually pretty short as well, rarely getting much higher than 20 minutes. This is another ride that might be fun if you have kids, but otherwise is a pretty easy skip. Finally, let's talk about the High in the Sky Seuss Trolley Train Ride. This is a simple train ride that takes you around Seuss Landing, offering a unique viewpoint from high off the regular pathways. There are 2 different tracks that take you to 2 different places, so it's worth a re-ride if you have the time. Like all the attractions in Seuss Landing, I'd put this at a 1 out of 5 on the intensity scale. However, this attraction tends to get the longest lines of the bunch, sometimes ending up in the 40 to 50 minute range. I wouldn't say it's long on average, but it can get long depending on the day. Still, if it's around the 30-minute point, I'd recommend giving this a shot. It's a really charming ride with some great views, and by far my favorite in this area of the park. Even if you're an adult, it's a fun time, although it's obviously not a 5-star ride or anything. It's just a cute little ride that's worth your time if you're able. Next up, let's head on through the Lost Continent to get to one of the most iconic theme park lands in the world, Hogsmeade. This is home to 3 of the most popular attractions at the park, but also 3 of the best. Let's start off with Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure, one of the newest rides at the park. This is a family roller coaster taking you on a journey throughout the Forbidden Forest, encountering several magical creatures along the way. Despite it being a roller coaster, I don't think this ride is extremely intense. It has its moments, but compared to some of the other coasters at the park, I would probably place it at a 4 out of 5 on the intensity scale. As for the average wait time, as you might expect, it is very, very long. This is typically the longest wait time in the entire resort, with an average range of 1 to 3 hours. If you see it at around an hour, I'd take your chances and get in line. No matter how long you have to wait though, you have to do this ride. It's one of the best attractions in the entire resort, with fantastic theming and some great surprises. Although the wait may seem a bit rough, it's entirely worth your time if you've never experienced this attraction. It's truly something special. Close by is yet another Harry Potter themed roller coaster, Flight of the Hippogriff. This is a much less intense kiddie coaster, with some nice scenery but not much in terms of theming. I'd place it at a 2 out of 5 on the intensity scale, making it perfect for younger guests. When it comes to the wait times, like Hagrid's, this sees some of the longest waits at the park. It typically hovers around the 60-minute mark, although it can get both shorter or longer. It's worth a shot if you have the time, but otherwise this is my least favorite of the 3 Harry Potter attractions here. It's fine enough if you have kids, but too short of an experience to justify its enormous wait time. Last but not least, we'll enter the halls of Hogwarts Castle to experience Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey. This is one of the most innovative dark rides ever made, taking you to several iconic locations throughout the Wizarding World. It can be a bit scary and intense, with some near-inverting moments and face-to-face encounters with several creatures. Because of that, I'd put it at a 3 out of 5 on the intensity scale, although it is leaning on a 4. As for wait time, shockingly enough, this is by far the least busy of the 3 attractions in the land. It can get long, around 60 minutes, but ever since Hagrid's opened, I've often seen it around the 20 to 30 minute mark. If you see it at around that length, this is an absolute no-brainer to do. It's one of the star attractions of the park, and one of the best dark rides ever made. Even if it's around an hour wait, it's definitely worth it, although perhaps try waiting until the wait time goes down a little bit. Right outside the Wizarding World stands the gate leading into Jurassic Park, where our next 3 attractions sit. First up is the newest ride at the park, Jurassic World Velocicoaster. This is an intense roller coaster where you'll be sent through a raptor paddock and burst out the other end. This may be the most intense ride in the resort, so it gets an easy 5 out of 5 on the intensity scale. Because of how new and crazy it is, this ride also tends to get some very long waits. Not quite as long as Hagrid's, but still hovering around an hour at least. As for my personal recommendation, if you're not afraid of roller coasters, you have to ride this. This is my favorite roller coaster I've ever been on, and I doubt there's anything out there that could top it. It's an insane ride, and my personal favorite at the park. A little ways down is our second dinosaur-themed attraction, Jurassic Park River Adventure. This water ride is a well-themed journey through the rivers of Jurassic Park, with an intense and terrifying drop to top it all off. While most of the ride is pretty serene, that final drop alone is enough to raise this to a 3 out of 5 on the intensity scale. The line for this ride depends on when you're visiting. Since it's a water ride, lines will usually be longer around the summertime and dip in the wintertime. Along with that, lines will also get longer later into the day, when the sun is at its brightest. Overall though, I'd say the wait times are about average. If it's not too cold out and the line isn't too long, I'd highly recommend this ride. All of the water rides at Universal are fantastic, and this one gets you the least wet of the 3. It still gets you pretty wet, don't get me wrong, but the other 2 are just insane. We'll get to them later in the video. For now, let's head on into Camp Jurassic for the final ride here at Jurassic Park. Pteranodon Flyers is a kid-friendly ride in the skies on your very own dinosaur. In fact, this ride is so kid-friendly that you can only go on it if you have a kid with you. Because of that, I've actually never been on this ride, so I couldn't give you an accurate rating of the intensity or my personal recommendation. Regardless, from what I've seen, the line for this ride can get very long. Sometimes it peaks all the way up at 60 minutes, which doesn't seem worth it from what I've heard. Regardless, if you have a kid with you, it may be worth a shot. Not a lot of people have been on this ride because of the kids-only restrictions, so it's a unique experience to have at the parks. If you have been on this ride, be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments down below. Anyways, that's all for Jurassic Park. Now, let's head right into the home of King Kong himself, Skull Island. Skull Island Reign of Kong is a simulated dark ride similar to Fast and Furious at Universal Studios. Here, you'll journey into Kong's home and escape the many creatures found on Skull Island. Being a simulator ride, I'd put this at a 2 out of 5 on the intensity scale, although the jerking motions and loud noises put it close to a 3. When it comes to wait times, however, this ride has insanely long lines. I often see this ride with at least a 45-minute wait, and often even longer than that. For that absurdly long wait time, I don't think this ride is worth it. If you catch it at around 20 to 30 minutes, I'd give it a shot, but admittedly, the ride itself is okay at best. I like it just fine, but I know plenty of people that straight up hate it. Again, you may as well try if it's around 30 minutes, but I'd skip it if it's any longer than that. Now, let's head out of the dark Skull Island and into the bright and colorful Toon Lagoon. The first ride we'll see in this land is Dudley Do-Right's Ripsaw Falls, a log flume water ride that gets guests absolutely soaked. With its 3 intense drops, I have to put this at a 3 out of 5 on the intensity scale. As for the wait time, like Jurassic Park River Adventure, it really depends what time of the year you're going. This one can get all the way up to 2 hours long, but also all the way down to 20 minutes. In terms of my personal recommendation, I'd say you should give it a shot. If it's an insanely long wait, you should probably skip it, but otherwise, it is one of my favorite water rides I've ever been on. Popeye and Bluto's Bilge Rat Barges is known for getting people drenched from head to toe. It's not any more intense than those other 2 water rides, probably around a 3 out of 5, but it's much more random and unkind to those wanting to stay dry. Again, the wait time depends on when you go, but this generally has the least insane wait times of the 3 water rides here. If you're willing to get drenched, I'd highly recommend this ride, especially if you're with a group of people. Watching people's reactions as they get hit by the waterfall is one of the great joys of life. Next up, let's jump straight into Marvel Superhero Island to talk about the amazing adventures of Spider-Man. This high-tech dark ride takes guests into Spider-Man's New York City, where the Sinister Six is trying to steal the Statue of Liberty. While it does throw you around a bit, I wouldn't give this ride any higher than a 3 out of 5 on the intensity scale. It can get bumpy, but nothing too extreme. As for the wait time, I'd say it's about average. While I've seen it peak at around 60 minutes, most of the time it's somewhere between 20 and 40. No matter how long you have to wait, this is an essential ride. Each time I re-ride it, I become more and more tempted to call it my favorite at the park. While I'm unsure it quite takes that crown, it's certainly high up there. You have to do this when you go to the park. Around the corner from Spider-Man sits Dr. Doom's Fearfall, a fairly simple drop tower ride. Despite its short length, it is fairly intense, with a drop from 185 feet in the air. That puts it at a 4 out of 5 on the intensity scale. As for the lines, I don't usually see this much higher than 30 minutes. It can get long on certain days, but most of the time, it's pretty short. For my personal recommendation, I'd say it depends. To me, this ride is nothing special, although the queue is kind of fun to look through. It's just too short of an experience to justify any more than a 20-minute wait, so as long as it's less than that, you may as well give it a shot. Next up is the penultimate attraction on our list, Stormforce Accelatron. This is a simple spinning flat ride located right next to the Incredible Hulk coaster. It can get intense depending on how much you spin, but nothing more than a 3 out of 5. The lines also don't get very long for this one, usually somewhere in the 30-minute area. This is another one that can go either way for me. If you want to try it, you may as well, but for me, it's one I always skip when I'm at the park. It's not bad, but nothing special either. Finally, let's end this with the Incredible Hulk coaster. This huge B&M looper stands 110 feet tall with 7 intense inversions. This is tied with Velocicoaster for the most intense ride at the resort, making it an easy 5 out of 5 on the intensity scale. It can also get some very long lines, typically at the beginning of the day since it's at the front of the park. Other times, however, it can get as short as 15 minutes, so be sure to wait it out if you can. If you're a roller coaster fan, this is a must-do at the park. It's incredibly intense, but in a totally different way than Velocicoaster, which makes it a really fun ride in comparison. I understand skipping it if roller coasters aren't your thing, but otherwise, this is a great ride to hop on. And that's every ride at the Universal Orlando Resort. For more on the Orlando parks, check out this video ranking every park at Walt Disney World. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.